October 2015. Marej and her daughter Sophia were having dinner at a restaurant in Kampala, Uganda, where the mother had come from the Netherlands to visit her daughter. She looked at Sophia with love and thought about what a grown, independent, yet kind and wonderful young woman she had become. 21-year-old Sophia was on the verge of becoming a doctor, specializing in tropical medicine. She had just completed an 8-week internship at a Ugandan hospital and was thrilled with her work, the people around her, and the country as a whole. Mother and daughter dined, laughed, and discussed future plans. The girl admitted that she liked it in Uganda, and if the hospital asked her to stay a couple more months, she would agree. For now, she had decided to go on safari, visit several more towns and local national parks. She would be accompanied by other students from the Netherlands and an experienced guide. The trip promised to be very enjoyable, and there was nothing for her mother to worry about. Apparently, that was the case, because about a week later, Sophia called her mother and excitedly told her about the journey. She and a group of tourists were on a boat trip along the White Nile in the country's largest national park, and the girl was beside herself with happiness. However, just a few hours later, Marej received a call from one of her daughter's friends, who shocked her with the news that Sophia had disappeared, as if she had vanished into thin air. She had stepped away for literally a couple of minutes, and now they couldn't find her anywhere. The local police hastily closed the case, claiming that the girl had fallen victim to a dangerous animal, of which there are plenty in the Nile basin. But Marej uncovered information never meant for her eyes or ears, and what she found changed everything. The police had no body, no blood, only the truth they had kept hidden for far too long. The girl's underwear was found in a tree 5 meters above the ground. Her pants had been cut into thin, even strips and wound around branches, while the rest of her belongings were neatly laid out for display. What kind of animal arranges its prey's belongings? Only one, the most dangerous animal in this world, one that lives not in the jungle, but in the concrete jungle. Sophia Isabella Frederica Koetsier was born on April 2, 1994, in Amsterdam, the Netherlands, into a warm and loving family of Gerard Koetsier and Marie Slickerman. Sophia was the eldest of 3 children. She grew up as a bright and ambitious girl. As a child, she developed a love for theater and attended the Amsterdam Theater School for several years. She was also fond of hockey and basketball and often went running in Vondelpark. Later, however, her attention became fully captured by medicine. She realized what she wanted to dedicate her life to, becoming a specialist in tropical medicine. It was an excellent choice for Sophia, one that allowed her to combine science and education with the possibility of visiting the most remote corners of the planet. She completed her bachelor's degree and was soon to become a doctor. But she wasn't in a hurry to begin her clinical residency. Instead, in August 2015, she flew to Uganda to complete an 8-week internship at a hospital in Lubega. The young woman enthusiastically threw herself into her hospital internship. She assisted in surgeries, in childbirth, and even scrubbed the floors when no one expected her to. She adored her work and gave herself to it completely. She even began learning the local Luganda language so she could communicate with patients without a language barrier. Her colleagues loved her for her diligence, compassion, and cheerful spirit. They gave her the nickname, the Morning Sunshine. Local children adored her as well. They would often follow Sophia around simply to be near her. Inspired by such a warm reception, Sophia even admitted to her mother that one day she would like to move to Uganda. On October 21st, she and her mother met in Kampala, where Marie had come to visit her daughter. The girl's 8-week internship had come to an end, but Sophia decided to stay in Uganda a little longer. After saying goodbye to the nurses, she set off on a safari together with 2 other Dutch students and a local guide, Michael Kijambu. Marie let her daughter go with an easy heart. The girl had worked hard at the hospital and had earned this rest. Over the course of 5 days, the small tourist group visited Fort Portal, Kidepo Valley National Park, Gulu, and Pakwach before reaching their final destination, Murchison Falls National Park. This is the largest park in Uganda, attracting travelers with its breathtaking waterfalls and diverse wildlife. The group arrived at the park around noon on October 28th. Upon arrival, they went for a boat ride along the Victoria Nile, the smaller of the Nile's 2 main tributaries. After the boat trip, the tourists and their guide stopped at an educational center where they planned to spend the night. The center was simple, consisting of huts, a few common areas, and the most primitive toilets nearby. It was around 6:30 p.m., and darkness was beginning to fall as the group started unpacking their backpacks. Sophia told the others she was going to relieve herself and headed toward the toilets just a few meters away. In her hands, she carried a plastic water bottle, which she used for throwing away trash. After all, during the safari, trash bins were almost nowhere to be seen. When the girl hadn't returned after 15 minutes, the other members of the group began to worry. They checked the toilets, searched the camp, and, not finding Sophia, hurried to report it to the rangers, who immediately began the search. However, the search was greatly complicated by the approaching night and the dangerous area they were in. After all, the Victoria Nile, a section of the White Nile, is the natural habitat of lions, hippos, and crocodiles. Sophia's fellow student friends came up with an unusual idea. They played Sophia's favorite song, Isabella by Saudi Soul, over and over again in the car, hoping that if she had lost her way, she might hear the music and be able to follow the sound. Unfortunately, this did not work. By 9 o'clock, when the girl still had not appeared, her friends contacted her family. At that moment, Sophia's mother, Marie, had not yet flown out of Uganda, and so she hurried as quickly as possible to the site of her daughter's disappearance, accompanied by embassy representatives. With the sunrise, the search continued. Rangers, police officers, and soldiers all joined the effort. Soon, helicopters and a team of drone operators sent by the Dutch authorities also arrived to assist. Quite quickly, the rangers found the plastic bottle that Sophia had been using to throw away trash. The bottle lay about 5 meters from the bank of the White Nile. The discovery raised more questions than answers. Why was the bottle there? Why had the girl gone to the river? Had she really gotten lost? The number of questions increased when, on October 30th, about 40 hours after Sophia's disappearance, the rangers found other personal belongings of the girl. The items were located 50 meters from the bottle. The rangers discovered her pants, underwear, a single shoe, sunglasses, a torn 1,000 shilling note, and an empty souvenir bag that Sophia had bought in Kampala. 72 hours after the search began, the Ugandan police publicly announced that Sophia had been attacked by wild animals. This was their official conclusion. The story could have ended there, if not for the girl's family, who wanted to know more about what had actually happened. Marie continued to fly to Uganda over and over again to clarify the details of her daughter's disappearance. By August 2025, she had visited the country nearly 30 times. She realized that at the moment of Sophia's disappearance, the police had not conducted a proper investigation. She believed that something terrible had happened in Uganda 10 years earlier, and that the police were trying to cover it up. And she was probably right, because the worst details had not yet surfaced. It turned out that none of Sophia's belongings bore blood or signs of struggle. No one had heard any screams or calls for help, exactly what one would expect from an attack by a wild animal. But nothing was like that. Sophia's pants were found cut into thin strips. Together, these strips were about the length of one pant leg. The strips were wound around branches. Nearby lay a completely clean shoe without any dirt or blood. Sophia's underwear hung on a tree 5 meters above the ground. Finally, her sunglasses and souvenir bag were lying as if someone had carefully placed them on the ground. But what kind of animal lays out belongings like that? Moreover, according to the rangers, these items appeared 40 hours after Sophia's disappearance. They had not been there during the initial search. The rangers were certain because they had inspected the area. Thomas Coyne, a survival instructor who trained Navy SEALs and soldiers, examined the evidence and stated that the pants had been deliberately cut with a knife. They were not torn by animal teeth. The animal attack explanation was a convenient version for the local police, allowing them to quickly label the case as an unfortunate accident. But the evidence, or rather, the lack of expected evidence, told a different story. It goes without saying that once these facts became known, the theory of a wild animal attack could not withstand any scrutiny. However, at the same time that new facts about the case were coming to light, details about Sophia's health began to leak into the Ugandan press. When she was 16, she was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. Typically, this condition leads to sharp mood swings. A person can feel extreme elation, joy, or inspiration, followed by sudden shifts into sadness or depression. In Sophia's case, however, she only experienced the emotional highs without depressive episodes. Even then, according to her family, these highs occurred quite rarely. Marie explained that when Sophia found herself in chaotic environments, she could become overstimulated, but she never harmed herself. In fact, under pressure, she seemed to flourish. Sophia managed her condition with medication and led a perfectly normal life. She was often described as focused, disciplined, and capable of achieving great heights, especially in Uganda, where she earned the respect and admiration of her colleagues. But none of this seemed to matter. Using information about the girl's health, the Ugandan media began to attack her. They wrote that she could put herself in danger, disappear into unknown places, or even harm herself. Some journalists shamelessly called her crazy. Bipolar disorder became a weapon used against her. This scrutiny was even more intense because other tourists had noticed her condition. Several years later, Sophia's mother, Marie, was contacted by a witness, a woman from the United Kingdom who had also been at Kitapo Valley National Park with her family in October 2015. At night, she and her husband woke up due to a strange noise. They couldn't sleep, so they went to check what was happening. On the viewing platform, they saw Sophia. The girl politely apologized for the noise. Sophia spoke clearly and coherently, but despite that, she appeared emotionally vulnerable to the witness. In the morning, the couple approached Michael Kambu, the guide who had taken Sophia's group on the safari. They advised him not to continue the journey until he was sure that Sophia was feeling better. However, he did not take their warning seriously. Later, Sophia's mother, Marie, learned that other students from the Netherlands who were traveling with Sophia had also noticed her condition. According to them, the girl's behavior changed on the 26th. Sophia began to sleep much less at night, spoke non-stop, and tried to break the chairs arranged near the campfire. In the morning, she greatly frightened her safari companions when it turned out that she had spent the night not in a cabin, but outside on the viewing platform. When, stunned, they asked her why she had done this, Sophia explained that she had decided to challenge herself and wanted to see if she could spend the night practically under the open sky. It became impossible to ignore Sophia's behavior, and the other students wanted to call her mother, but Sophia persuaded them not to. However, they told everything to Michael, the guide, who, hoping to ease the tension in the group, changed the route to visit calmer locations. But when they arrived at Murchison Falls, Sophia's behavior, which seemed to have normalized, became unstable again. During a boat ride along the White Nile, the tension in the group started to rise once more. The situation was complicated by the fact that Sophia was irritated by the worried looks directed at her. Possibly for this reason, during the boat ride, she spent a long time locked in the restroom. As her mother later explained, most likely Sophia wanted to hide from the overly bright sounds, lights, and vivid colors of the surrounding area, simply to calm herself. According to her mother, the guide should not have led the group to Murchison Falls at all, since he knew that Sophia was not feeling well. Yet Marie only learned the full story years after her daughter disappeared. Although the local police had forgotten about Sophia's case, her mother could not follow their example. She did not just write emails and wait for a call from the embassy. Every time she personally flew to Uganda, which allowed her to completely disprove the police's version that Sophia had been attacked by wild animals. But then she learned something even more horrifying. Marie took the case into her own hands and privately initiated DNA testing on all of her daughter's recovered belongings. And besides Sophia's DNA, the Dutch laboratory specialists found a large amount of male DNA on them. On every single recovered item, there was male DNA. These were not the other students from the Netherlands who had traveled with her daughter. Marie also excluded Ugandan police officers who had handled the items. All of them willingly provided DNA samples. Altogether, Marie managed to obtain about 10 samples for comparison. But unexpectedly, it became clear that the list of suspects had to include another 400 people. In 2015, 400 rangers were training less than 2 kilometers from the place where Sophia disappeared. Needless to say, nobody had interviewed them or checked their alibis. If it weren't for Sophia's mother, no one would even have mentioned this publicly. Likewise, no one planned to highlight that the police actually had a witness, someone who had apparently seen Sophia last on that fateful night. The witness, a local ranger whose name is not disclosed, stated that he had seen Sophia near the restrooms before she disappeared. The girl was standing and looking in the direction of the river. Then the same man saw Sophia talking to another ranger. However, the other ranger claimed that he had never spoken to Sophia, and the police simply left him alone. He was neither interrogated nor asked to provide a DNA sample. Considering all the details of the case, Sophia's mother cannot understand how the Ugandan police could close it so quickly. The woman repeatedly says, "If you don't know anything, you cannot rule anything out." That is why she will not stop until the man responsible for that DNA is identified. She replays in her mind the horrors that could have happened to her daughter that night, because the scattered evidence and the complete silence surrounding that night point to something terrible. In 2019, Marie and Gerard managed to meet with the president of Uganda, Yoweri Kaguta Museveni Tibuburwa, and the First Lady. Their meeting led to a new wave of investigation. However, the coronavirus pandemic intervened, followed by national elections and government reshuffles. Then suddenly in July 2025, 10 years after Sophia's disappearance, news broke in Uganda that hit like a bomb. Michael Kazambu, the guide who led Sophia's group through northern Uganda, the man responsible for the tourist safety, who drove the vehicle and chose the rest stops, turned out not even to have a guide's license. Because of this, in July 2025, he appeared in court. Overall, his behavior during that trip raises many questions. First and foremost, he ignored several warnings about Sophia's emotional state. Students from the Netherlands, a British couple, and even another Kidappo ranger, Stephen Nyadru, informed Michael that Sophia was behaving strangely, making noise at night, trying to set grass on fire, which indicated her unstable emotional condition. Stephen Nyadru strongly recommended that Michael seek medical assistance for her and cancel the trip to Murchison Falls National Park. Yet all Michael did was slightly alter the route. The group was supposed to travel to Kitgum, but Michael took them to a quieter location in Gulu, after which they still headed to Murchison Falls. When news of someone disappearing from the tourist group reached Kidappo, Stephen Nyadru called Michael, who lied, claiming that they had stayed in Gulu. But the truth could not be hidden for long, and soon the horrifying news was confirmed. Someone had disappeared from Murchison Falls National Park. Until that moment, Michael had never been held accountable. But now, even in court, he had no answers. And what he did not say could be even more terrifying than what he actually did. So, what is known 10 years after Sophia's disappearance? The idea of an animal attack can be safely dismissed. It is unlikely that Sophia could have drowned, because even if she had entered the water in the dark, she would have heard the music her friends were playing and would have found her way back or called for help. And it is also unlikely that Sophia wanted to harm herself, since her bipolar disorder only led to emotional highs, not depression. However, the place where the girl disappeared did not just suggest, but shouted about the involvement of at least one unknown person. Sophia could not have thrown her underwear to a height of 5 meters, and she certainly could not have cut her trousers into strips of fabric. If nothing else, because she did not have scissors or a knife with her. She could not have hidden her tracks, because no one had ever taught her how. Yet in the area of her disappearance, there were more than 400 men, all fully capable of such skills. And finally, the most undeniable piece of evidence, a large amount of DNA from an unknown man. Today, there are 2 theories about what happened, and both are horrifying. The first is human trafficking. Sophia was a young, solitary foreign girl, and her vulnerable state could have made her an easy target. Unfortunately, human trafficking in Uganda is a widespread problem. Women and children are kidnapped either to demand ransom from their wealthy European or American relatives, or taken to Canada, Egypt, the UAE, or Saudi Arabia, where they are sold for sexual exploitation or forced labor. The second theory is no better because it is possible that Sophia has remained in Murchison Falls National Park forever. One innumerable person, or even a whole group, could have done something terrible to her that night, and then gotten rid of the body, knowing that the local police would rush to close the case. Marej agrees that on October 28th, her daughter encountered the wrong people, and one of them could have been standing next to her that night. The mother insists on checking the DNA of the ranger who was seen with Sophia before she disappeared. She is confident that this will either clear his name or lead to a real breakthrough in the case. Marej laments that, being a citizen of one of the wealthiest countries in the world, you expect help and support when a tragedy happens abroad. But you only believe that while everything is going well, because as soon as a tragedy occurs, the Dutch police wash their hands of it, forcing the family of the missing girl to pay for the investigation and all the analyses. And the local police, instead of doing their job, blame the victim. Why did they decide to call Sophia insane and not investigate the case? Why did they cling to a single piece of the puzzle and ignore her successful studies, career, and achievements? To cover someone up? To avoid criticism about local safety? Or was it simply easier to blame an animal than to investigate a crime? Or maybe because by calling her insane, they could avoid answering questions such as how her underwear ended up in a tree, who planted all the evidence, or whose DNA was found on all of Sophia's personal belongings. Because if Sophia was emotionally unstable, then someone else remained calm and cold. someone dangerous who knew how the police in Uganda operate and possibly even dressed in a ranger's uniform.